Maximus J. Thrum had always considered himself a man of simple tastes. A stiff drink, a comfortable chair, and the undeniable pleasure of watching alien bureaucrats squirm in their impossibly alien seats. Today, he had all three. The Grand Council chamber of the Intergalactic Concordium, think Roman Senate meets interstellar IKEA, was filled to the brim with the kind of pompousness that could only be achieved by species who had nothing better to do than argue over the finer points of galaxy-wide legislation. "Would the accused please step forward?" droned a voice that sounded like gravel being poured into a blender. It belonged to some gelatinous entity whose name Thrum had forgotten as soon as he'd heard it. Probably something with too many consonants and not enough vowels. Thrum adjusted his suit, which had been tailored to perfection back on Earth, by a tailor who presumably hated him. It pinched in all the wrong places, but he wasn't about to give these extraterrestrial aristocrats the satisfaction of seeing him squirm. He took a leisurely stroll to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. "Ah, the famous Maximus J. Thrum," said an alien with a head that resembled a poorly made soufflé. It glistened under the harsh artificial lights. "Do you have any idea why you're here?" "I dunno," Thrum replied, scratching an itch that wasn't there. "Did Earth win the Most Unwelcome Species Award again?" The chamber erupted in a cacophony of offended murmurs and indignant hisses. Thrum gave a half-hearted shrug. "What, no trophy?" The soufflé-headed alien leaned forward, its eyes narrowing. "You are accused of deploying Earth technology that has destabilized the Rylathian Empire." "Did we?" Thrum feigned surprise. "Because last I checked, Earth tech couldn't destabilize a house of cards." "Have you seen our public transportation systems?" More murmurs, more hisses. The alien held up a pseudopod for silence. "This is no laughing matter, human. The devices you've introduced have caused widespread economic chaos." Thrum spread his hands wide, adopting the kind of innocent expression that could get you out of a parking ticket. "Look, all we did was sell them some straightforward tech, hoverboards, a few AI assistants, and maybe a couple of self-cleaning toilets." "Self-cleaning toilets that have led to the collapse of Rylathian sanitation services," the alien countered. "Their economy is in turmoil. Gotta love a toilet that can flush an empire," Thrum muttered, loud enough for his translator to pick up. Thrum surveyed the room, taking in the mix of flora, fauna, and things that defied categorization. It was like attending a family reunion, assuming your family consisted of entities that could dissolve you with a mildly annoyed glance. "Look," Thrum continued, "I get it. Earth is the new kid on the cosmic block. We disrupt things. It's what we do. But maybe, just maybe, if the Rylathians didn't have an economy that could be unraveled by a crapper, they wouldn't be in this mess." The chamber was silent for a beat, then the soufflé-headed alien spoke again. "You mock our concerns?" Thrum shook his head, adopting a more serious tone. "No, I mock the idea that Earth tech is to blame for systemic failures. We're not the root of the problem. We're just the catalyst that exposed it." "And what of the other empires?" Another alien chimed in, this one resembling a sentient tumbleweed. "We are concerned about your unpredictable advancements." "Advancements?" Thrum chuckled. "Trust me, we're just as surprised by our tech as you are. Half of it was invented by accident." "You jest," the tumbleweed said, its voice rustling like dry leaves. "I wish I was," Thrum replied. "Our greatest scientific breakthrough came from a guy trying to fix his microwave." There was a collective intake of breath from the aliens, a sound akin to a vacuum inhaling a bag of marbles. "Look," Thrum said, growing weary of the back and forth. "Earth isn't trying to dominate the galaxy. We're just here to get by, same as everyone else." A low murmur rippled through the crowd, but Thrum could sense he'd at least planted a seed of doubt, or maybe it was just indigestion from the alien cuisine he'd tried earlier. "We will deliberate," the soufflé-headed alien announced, its tone indicating a recess rather than a resolution. Thrum turned to leave, his smile fading as he walked back to his seat. This was far from over, and he knew it. The wheels of intergalactic bureaucracy ground slower than a tortoise on tranquilizers. As he sat down, an unidentifiable creature next to him leaned over. "You're either very brave or very stupid," it whispered, its voice a mix of static and sincerity. Thrum gave a tired smile. "Can't I be both?" The creature chuckled, a sound like a modem from the 1990s on its last legs. "Fair enough." The council chamber began to empty, the various representatives retreating to their chambers to engage in the kind of discussion that was as productive as a debate with a brick wall. Thrum watched them leave, each species moving with a distinct gait, a reminder of how diverse and dysfunctional this galaxy was. "You've got a lot of guts, human," said another envoy, a creature resembling a disgruntled cactus. "But guts won't save you if the Concordium decides Earth's a threat." "Good thing I don't rely on guts alone," Thrum replied, tapping his temple. "Brains?" The cactus snorted, if such a thing was possible. "Wit," Thrum corrected. "Brains are overrated." The cactus chuckled, a sound like gravel underfoot. "You'll need more than wit to get out of this one." As the chamber emptied, Thrum pondered the cactus's words. He'd played his cards, but the game was still in motion. The empires were scared, and scared entities did stupid things. He'd have to be ready for whatever stupidity came next. Looking around the now sparsely populated room, he thought about Earth, a planet full of contradictions. A place where they could split the atom, but still couldn't figure out how to make a decent cup of instant coffee. Yet here he was, defending humanity's right to screw up on a universal scale. Thrum leaned back in his chair, letting out a long breath. This was just the beginning. The real challenge was keeping Earth in the game long enough for humanity to realize it was playing one. He glanced at the ceiling, which was adorned with an ostentatious display of stars and cosmic swirls. Like the universe had vomited its contents in an attempt to impress. Typical aliens, always trying too hard. As the last of the delegates filed out, Thrum was left alone with his thoughts. Well, him and the omnipresent surveillance systems that were undoubtedly recording his every move. Note to self, he muttered under his breath. Invent a universal remote for alien bureaucrats. Might make this whole diplomacy thing a bit more bearable. With that, Thrum stood up and headed for the exit, ready to face whatever fresh hell awaited him outside the Grand Council chamber. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and, not unlike a self-cleaning toilet, liable to backfire at any moment. But if anyone could handle it, it was Maximus J. Thrum, professional human and accidental diplomat. As he stepped out into the corridor, the lights overhead flickered ominously, as if the universe was warning him of things to come. Thrum just grinned and walked on, ready to meet the galaxy head-on. After all, if Earth was destined to become the unexpected villain of the cosmos, he might as well enjoy the ride. Maximus J. Thrum adjusted his tie, well, more like tugged at it in a futile attempt to gain some breathing room, as he was called back into the intergalactic Concordium Grand Council chamber. The place was still as obnoxiously over-designed as he remembered, and as full of aliens who had nothing better to do than hold hearings about humanity's latest blunder. Maximus J. Thrum, the soufflé-headed alien, Zingakara, as he'd finally remembered, intoned with all the gravitas of a funeral dirge, "The council has reconvened." "Great," Thrum replied, feigning enthusiasm. "I was hoping to spend more quality time with galactic aristocrats who look like they're auditioning for a horror flick." He took his place in the center of the chamber again, glancing around at the bizarre collection of extraterrestrial life. There was Zingakara with his wobbly head, the gelatinous entity whose name was still a mystery to him, and a variety of others that seemed to defy natural selection itself. "We have reviewed additional evidence," Zingakara continued, "which suggests your advanced AI technology has exacerbated unrest within the Rylathian Empire." An alien with a face like a melted marshmallow gingerly handed over a datapad to the tribunal. Thrum resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "Oh, the AI," he said, nodding sagely. "Yeah, I can see how that might cause some complications. You know, for an empire built on the fragile scaffolding of competence." "You are not taking this seriously, human," Zingakara chastised. "I take it seriously," Thrum replied, leaning against the podium like he was making himself truly comfortable for the first time. "I just don't take you seriously." A cacophony of shocked exclamations filled the chamber. Thrum ignored them, opting instead to study the ceiling. Perhaps it held answers to life's greatest mysteries, like why space aliens always seemed to think they were the be-all and end-all of wisdom. "The AI in question," Zingakara pressed on, unperturbed by Thrum's irreverence, "has led to the destabilization of Rylathian agricultural systems." "Let me guess," Thrum said, smirking. "It figured out that crop rotation isn't just a quaint Earth tradition?" Zingakara's expression soured, like someone had just informed him his soufflé was undercooked. "The AI modified the harvesting algorithms," he said, leading to overproduction and a subsequent market crash. Well, that's what happens when you give a machine a brain and no common sense, Thrum said. Although, in its defense, it was probably trying to help. You know, like a toddler with a chainsaw. The gelatinous entity rumbled its gravelly voice into the mix. The Rylathians are not amused by your metaphor, Earthling. Hey, I'm not exactly thrilled about having to be here either, Thrum shot back. But here we are, dealing with the galactic aftermath of what was essentially a malfunctioning Roomba. You jest at a serious issue, Zingakara replied, his souffle head bobbing dangerously. Thrum sighed, his bravado fading. Look, the AI was supposed to make things better, not cause a cosmic-level food fight. I'm not denying there's a problem. I'm just saying maybe you shouldn't have given the keys to the kingdom to something that can't even laugh at a joke. Zingakara huffed, a sound like air escaping a punctured balloon. And you claim Earth had no ulterior motives? Ulterior motives? Thrum repeated, incredulous. Listen, pal, Earth can't even pick a favorite pizza topping, let alone coordinate some interstellar coup. We're as surprised as you are. The council murmured amongst themselves, the sound reminiscent of a group of cats deciding who to blame for the spilled milk. Thrum watched them with a kind of detached amusement, knowing full well that the truth was about as slippery as the floor after a Rylathian banquet. The tumbleweed alien spoke up again, its voice prickling the air. You expect us to believe this was all an accident? Expect? No, Thrum admitted. Hope? Sure. Let's just say we're not exactly known for our forward planning. I mean, we put a man on the moon before we figured out the internet. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that usually preceded a storm. Thrum could almost hear the gears turning in the alien minds, wondering if humanity was truly the chaotic neutral of the universe or just plain stupid. We need assurances, Zingakara said finally, that Earth will not allow such technology to disrupt other empires. Thrum nodded slowly, the weight of the situation finally crashing down on him like a malfunctioning space elevator. We'll do our best, he said, sincerity bleeding into his tone. But remember, Earth isn't out to topple empires. We're just hoping to survive our own screw-ups. Zingakara's eyes narrowed, a gesture that looked particularly odd on a souffle-headed alien. Do not mistake our caution for weakness, Thrum. The Concordium will not tolerate further negligence. I hear you, Thrum said, raising his hands in placation. And trust me, the last thing I want is to go down in history as the guy who got humanity kicked out of the galaxy for bad tech support. The council seemed somewhat mollified, though Thrum doubted this was anywhere near over. Still, he had planted the seed of doubt, a tiny, fragile thing, but it was a start. Now, he just had to hope it would grow into something more than a weed in the garden of galactic diplomacy. As the council moved to conclude, Zingakara fixed him with one last, lingering gaze. We will continue to monitor Earth's activities. Be assured, Thrum, that we will not be swayed by humor and deflections alone. Wouldn't dream of it, Thrum said, offering a grin that was half charm, half defiance. The council chamber began to empty once more, the various representatives departing in their peculiar ways. The gelatinous entity oozed out, the tumbleweed rolled with a purpose, and the marshmallow-faced alien seemed to float away, as if carried by an unseen breeze. Thrum watched them go, a strange mix of relief and dread settling in his chest. This dance with interstellar bureaucracy was far from over, and he had a feeling he'd be hearing from Zingakara again sooner rather than later. He just hoped it wouldn't involve more AI horror stories or economic disasters. As the last of the aliens left, Thrum took a moment to glance around the now empty chamber. It was a ridiculous place, really. A mishmash of alien design so convoluted it could only have been conceived by committee. Yet here, decisions were made that could alter the course of entire civilizations. He chuckled to himself, shaking his head. Well, Maximus, he muttered, welcome to the madhouse. Population. You. With that, he turned and made his way to the exit, trying to ignore the sensation that he was leaving a part of himself behind in that bizarre room. A part that was reluctantly becoming accustomed to the absurdity of intergalactic politics. Outside, the corridor was bustling with the usual chaos of diplomatic life. Aides scurrying about with grim expressions, aliens arguing in 100 different languages, and the occasional sound of someone dropping what sounded like a very expensive piece of technology. Thrum slipped into the flow of traffic, his mind already working on the next steps. Damage control, he supposed. Assure Earth's AI division that their latest innovation hadn't single-handedly started a war. Well, not intentionally, anyway. And maybe, just maybe, figure out a way to teach machines the delicate art of not being complete idiots. The galaxy was a vast, unpredictable place, filled with wonders and terrors in equal measure. But if anyone could navigate its treacherous currents, it was Maximus J. Thrum, accidental ambassador and reluctant hero. Now he just had to keep his head above water long enough to steer Earth clear of its next crisis. As he walked away from the Grand Council chamber, he couldn't help but smile. The universe was a mess, but it was a glorious mess, one that humans were all too familiar with. And if that meant dealing with soufflé-headed aliens and malfunctioning AI, so be it. After all, what was life without a little chaos? With a final glance over his shoulder, Thrum stepped into the throng, ready to take on whatever interstellar insanity awaited him next. Whether it was diffusing a diplomatic incident or just finding a decent cup of coffee, he'd face it with the same irreverent spirit that had gotten him this far. And maybe, just maybe, he'd find a way to turn humanity's cosmic missteps into something resembling progress. Or at the very least, a really good story to tell over drinks. Either way, it was going to be one hell of a ride. Maximus J. Thrum strolled down the swirling chaos of the corridor, the echoes of the intergalactic Concordium Grand Council Chamber's recent meeting still bouncing around his skull like drunk mosquitoes at a summer barbecue. He'd barely crossed the threshold when his comm device crackled to life. "Max," came the voice of Leora Keswick, his assistant envoy and unofficial sanity anchor. "How'd it go? Did you charm them with your roguish wit or just your usual, 'I'm not here to start another interstellar incident' routine?" Thrum snorted. "A little from column A. A little from column B. Our friends in the council are convinced Earth tech is the universe's version of Pandora's box, minus the pretty bow." "Great," Leora replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm so thick you could bottle it and sell it as syrup. "So, what now? Meet me in the diplomatic lounge," Thrum said, weaving between a pair of squabbling aliens who looked like a cross between a centipede and a bad hair day. "We've got some Rylathian feathers to unruffle." As Thrum navigated the bustling hallways, he couldn't help but reflect on the lunacy of it all. Here they were, trying to convince an entire array of alien species that Earth wasn't out to destabilize the galaxy. It was like trying to persuade a paranoid cat that the vacuum cleaner wasn't plotting its demise. The diplomatic lounge was a misnomer if ever there was one, a sterile room outfitted with furniture that had been designed by someone who'd never actually seen a chair. Leora was already there, her expression a mix of exasperation and that peculiar glint she got whenever she was about to unleash one of her trademark schemes. Leora, with her auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail that screamed, "professional but can still choke you with it if needed," leaned back in a chair that looked more suited for an art installation than sitting. "Nice of you to join me in this hive of scum and villainy," she quipped. "Always a pleasure," Thrum replied, dropping into the seat opposite her. "So, any bright ideas on how we can convince the Rylathians that our tech isn't some kind of galactic supervillain?" "Funny you should ask," Leora said, a devilish grin spreading across her face. "I've just the thing. Meet Pixis." She tapped a button on her wrist device, and a small, spherical drone emerged from her bag, hovering in the air between them. The drone beeped enthusiastically, its blue eye blinking like an over-caffeinated pixie. Thrum raised an eyebrow. "Cute. What's it do? Besides tormenting cats, that is." "Pixis," Leora announced, as if introducing the star of a roadshow, is an Earth-made problem solver. Self-repairing, adaptive, and most importantly, capable of de-escalating technology-induced crises. "De-escalating, you say?" Thrum rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "And here I thought we were fresh out of miracles." "Don't get too excited," Leora shot back. "It won't solve all our problems, but it might just be enough to convince the council we're not just peddling techno-nightmares." "Any chance it can make soufflé heads smile while it's at it?" Thrum asked dryly. "One miracle at a time, Max," Leora said, chuckling. I doubt even Pixis could smooth over Zingakura's ego. Their banter was interrupted by the entrance of a delegation of Rylathian representatives, their stiff, feathered forms moving with the kind of uptight regality that suggested they had an excess of sticks and not enough places to store them. Ambassador Thrum, the lead Rylathian, who resembled a peacock and a garden rake, had a tragic accident, greeted him frostily. "We demand an explanation for the propagation of your technology beyond our borders." Thrum sighed, rising to meet yet another diplomatic disaster. Ah, the Rylathian delegation. What a surprise. I was just about to suggest we all take up knitting. Jesting will not save you, human, the Rylathian snapped, feathers bristling. Your technology has infiltrated our neighboring systems, wreaking havoc. Look, we didn't exactly send out invites, Thrum replied, gesturing to Leora. But we did bring a peace offering. Meet Pixis. The drone bobbed in the air, drawing the Rylathian's attention. Leora stepped forward, launching into a sales pitch that could sell snow to an Eskimo. Pixis here can analyze and rectify tech issues, reverse overproduction algorithms, and basically unfree your circuits. The Rylathian leader regarded Pixis with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity, like one might examine a suspiciously large gift horse. It is merely a toy, he declared, feathered brow furrowing. How can this ensure stability? And it juggles, too, Thrum said, unable to resist. But in all seriousness, it could help pinpoint where things went wrong. A diagnostic tool, if you will. A credit to Earth ingenuity, Leora added, not missing a beat. And it doesn't come with any ulterior motives. Just a genuine attempt to help. The Rylathian leader huffed, a sound reminiscent of a broken accordion. We shall see. Pixis, obedient to Leora's commands, began to demonstrate its capabilities. As it darted around the room, projecting holograms of potential solutions and recalibrating imaginary systems, a few Rylathians exchanged glances that, while not quite warm, were perhaps a few degrees above absolute zero. Thrum leaned back, arms crossed, as Leora worked her magic. She had a knack for this, turning calamities into cautious optimism with just a smidgen of tech wizardry and a healthy dose of charm. See? Thrum said, addressing the Rylathian delegation. Earth isn't all bad, we're just complicated. The Rylathian leader nodded slowly, his feathers settling somewhat. Your device, he admitted grudgingly, is not without merit. High praise, Leora said, flashing a victorious grin. So, what do you say? Give us a chance to prove we can fix what went wrong. The Rylathian leader hesitated, his gaze flickering between Pixis and the humans. Eventually, he sighed. You may proceed. Glad to hear it, Thrum replied, returning his attention to Leora. Next stop, interstellar tech support. As the Rylathians exited the room, Leora turned to Thrum, a glint of triumph in her eye. Think that did the trick? It's a start, Thrum conceded. But knowing our luck, the universe will throw us another curveball before tea time. Leora shrugged, her grin unfaltering. Wouldn't be fun otherwise, right? Yeah, fun, Thrum echoed, though he wasn't entirely sure whether he believed it. The universe was a spectacular mess, full of surprises, and as much as he hated to admit it, he wouldn't have it any other way. Outside the lounge, the diplomatic chaos continued unabated. Thrum could see Zingakara in the distance, presumably engaged in a heated debate with a gelatinous entity whose voice was more grating than a dental drill. Looks like our soufflé-headed friend is still keeping busy, Leora remarked, following Thrum's gaze. Yeah, and from the sound of it, he's not a fan of whatever the gelatinous blob is selling, Thrum replied. Maybe they're discussing the finer points of intergalactic cuisine, Leora suggested with a smirk. Or perhaps the best way to destabilize a galactic empire using only a spoon and a toothpick. Now that's a meeting I'd pay to see, Thrum said. But right now, we've got bigger fish to fry. As they headed back into the fray, Thrum couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Earth had a long way to go before it was accepted as anything more than a cosmic punching bag. But for now, they'd bought themselves some time. And in this universe, time was as precious as a decent cup of coffee, nearly impossible to find but worth every effort. Thrum just hoped that, together with Leora, they could make the most of it before the next disaster struck. After all, in the grand scheme of things, humans were nothing if not resilient. And if a little humor and a lot of stubbornness could help them navigate the chaotic ocean of extraterrestrial politics, then maybe, just maybe, they'd turn this interstellar farce into something resembling progress. Or, at the very least, an amusing anecdote to share over drinks in the distant future. Preferably on a planet where the tech didn't have a mind of its own. But for now, they had a mission, and whatever cosmic insanity lay ahead, Thrum was ready to face it head on. With a grin and a prayer to the gods of interstellar diplomacy, he and Leora plunged back into the swirling chaos, ready to take on the universe one snarky remark at a time. Thrum stood in the diplomatic lounge, which was absurdly named considering it was less for diplomacy and more for testing the limits of human patience. The chairs, designed by someone who clearly thought humans enjoyed sitting on origami, squeaked ominously under his weight. Leora lounged across from him, looking entirely too comfortable despite the geometric torture device masquerading as a seat. The Rylathian leader didn't outright murder us, she said, a hint of levity in her voice. I'd call that a win. Low standards, Leora, Thrum replied dryly. It's the secret to my sanity. Outside, the Intergalactic Concordium Grand Council was a maelstrom of debate. Aliens of all shapes and questionable evolutionary decisions were embroiled in discussions that made a bar brawl look like a tea party. Thrum watched the chaos through the room's clear walls, his mind running a marathon of doomsday scenarios. The council was divided, a fault line running right through the middle. On one side, the hopefuls who saw potential in Earth's technology, a chance for progress, improvement, and, potentially, a new way to obscure the utter dreadfulness of existence. On the other, the skeptics who saw Earth tech as a Pandora's box, minus the bow and twice the potential for disaster. He tapped a finger against his comm device, the rhythm a subconscious echo of his racing thoughts. We've got a split council, he said, his tone a mix of resignation and grim amusement. And if that's not a recipe for disaster, I don't know what is. Could be worse, Leora offered, leaning forward with that wicked glint in her eye. The one that said she was about to suggest something equal parts brilliant and mad. We could be on fire. Optimism, Thrum deadpanned. It's contagious. Before Leora could respond, the door hissed open, and in walked Zingakara, his souffle-shaped head held high, a look of perpetual disdain etched into every alien crease. Flanking him was a gelatinous entity, which oozed into the room with a sound akin to someone stirring a particularly stubborn pot of oatmeal. Ambassador Thrum, Zingakara intoned, his voice as smooth as a brick to the face. We must discuss the recent developments. Ah, Zingakara, Thrum said, his smile as genuine as a synthetic steak. What a pleasant surprise. I was just saying how much I missed our delightful chats. Zingakara's eyes narrowed, clearly unimpressed by Thrum's human charm offensive. Your Earth technology continues to cause division. Some among us believe it could revolutionize, others fear it may destabilize further. The gelatinous entity burbled something unintelligible, its voice a gravelly mix that made a dial-up modem sound harmonious. Right, Thrum said, nodding as if he understood. And you're here because, Ambassador, Zingakara said, his patience as thin as a cheap bedsheet, the Council demands a demonstration of your technology's true capabilities. There are concerns it might be more volatile than you claim. Volatile? Leora interjected, flashing a grin that could melt steel beams. Pixis is as volatile as a puppy in a blanket. Possibly less. Zingakara ignored her, looking squarely at Thrum. We need assurance that your technology will not lead to greater upheaval. Thrum sighed internally. It was always about assurance, even when the universe itself was a chaotic soup of uncertainty. Look, Earth tech isn't without its quirks, he admitted. But we've got a knack for turning crises into opportunities. Besides, what's life without a little chaos? Zingakara's expression remained unchanged, though his souffle head seemed to deflate slightly. The Council will deliberate on this, but I warn you, Ambassador. Evidence has surfaced suggesting possible further destabilization. Evidence? Thrum echoed, arching an eyebrow. Mind sharing with the class? The gelatinous entity gurgled a response, and Zingakara nodded. The evidence is complex. A data leak from your own system suggests potential for catastrophic failure if your technology is improperly managed. Thrum exchanged a glance with Leora, who shrugged. Improperly managed, she said, rolling her eyes. That's like blaming the weather on umbrellas. And yet, Zingakara continued, his tone icy, the risk is undeniable. We must explore these claims further. Of course, Thrum said, pasting on his best diplomatic smile. We're more than happy to cooperate. After all, what's a little existential threat between friends? Zingakara's eyes narrowed further, which Thrum didn't even think was possible. Just ensure, Ambassador, that your assurances are more than just words. With that, the alien delegation took their leave, the gelatinous entity leaving a slimy trail in its wake. Leora waited until the door closed before speaking. Well, that was fun, she said. Think they're onto something with this evidence? Who knows? Thrum replied, rubbing his temples. But we need to stay ahead of this before someone decides Earth needs a lesson in humility. Again, Leora nodded, the seriousness of the situation settling in like a stubborn stain. What's our next move then, Max? Thrum glanced at Pixis, the little drone hovering nearby like a loyal pet. We need to show them what this thing can really do. Prove that Earth tech isn't just a ticking time bomb. And if they don't buy it, then we improvise, Thrum said, his tone more hopeful than his thoughts. Because if there's one thing Earth is good at, it's making the impossible slightly less impossible. As they left the diplomatic lounge, the Council's division loomed like a storm cloud. The stakes were rising, and if they didn't play their cards right, Earth could find itself on the wrong end of a galactic eviction notice. Thrum just hoped they had enough tricks left up their sleeves to see them through. Because in the cosmic game of survival, bluffing only got you so far. And they were running out of time fast. Back in the council chamber, the debate had reached a fever pitch. Aliens shouted, gesticulated, and generally behaved like toddlers denied their nap. Thrum took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next round of interstellar diplomacy. Ready, Leora? He asked, adjusting his collar. Always, she replied, her confidence a beacon in the chaos. They entered the chamber, the cacophony hitting them like a physical force. Thrum raised his hands, a gesture that proved universally recognized as, please, for the love of all things sane, shut up. Esteemed members of the council, he began, his voice carrying over the din, let's talk about potential. Earth tech is more than just a collection of circuits and code, it's a tool for change. Including catastrophic change, someone from the back shouted, earning a ripple of agreement. Thrum forced a smile. True, it's not without risk. But what innovation is? We've survived our own blunders on Earth, we're practically experts. Leora stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. Pixis, she said, gesturing to the drone, is proof of what we can achieve. It's not a harbinger of doom, but a promise of progress. We ask for your trust, not because we're perfect, but because we're willing to learn. The room buzzed with skepticism, but there was also curiosity, a glimmer of interest in the eyes of the undecided. Let's work together, Thrum continued, turn this potential instability into a chance for growth. What do we have to lose, aside from our sanity? A few delegates chuckled, a welcome sign of cracking tension. Zingakara stood, his souffle head bobbing slightly. You make a compelling case, Ambassador. But words alone will not suffice. Of course not, Thrum agreed. Actions speak louder, after all. And we're ready to act. The murmurs continued, but they were softer now, more contemplative than hostile. Thrum could feel the scales tipping, albeit slowly. As the debate continued, he exchanged a look with Leora, a silent understanding passing between them. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they had a fighting chance. And for now, that was enough. Because if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was fighting against the odds, even when the universe seemed determined to laugh in their faces. The council adjourned for the day, leaving Thrum and Leora to contemplate their next move. They had bought themselves time, but the clock was ticking. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and they were the ones holding the scales. Think we'll make it through this? Leora asked as they walked back to their quarters. Thrum sighed, his mind a whirl of possibilities. We have to. Because if we don't, the universe is going to be a much less interesting place without us. Leora chuckled, her laughter a comforting presence in the uncertainty. Well, at least we'll go down swinging. Now there's the spirit, Thrum replied, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. As they prepared for the next day, the enormity of their task loomed over them. But with determination and a bit of gallows humor, they were ready to face whatever the cosmos threw their way. Because in the end, it wasn't just about surviving, it was about proving that humanity, with all its flaws and foibles, was worth fighting for. And that was a challenge Thrum was more than willing to take on. Maximus J. Thrum sat in the diplomatic lounge, staring at the decor that somehow managed to offend all five senses. The furniture, designed by someone who evidently hated comfort, mocked him with its impractical angles and scorn for lumbar support. He tapped a rhythm on his comm device, an age-old diplomat's habit that, in his case, signaled either deep contemplation or a desperate plea for rescue. Right now, it was more the latter. Leora Keswick, his ever-optimistic assistant and self-appointed sanity anchor, was perched on the edge of a chair that seemed one sneeze away from catastrophic collapse. Her presence was a soothing balm, a reminder that humanity wasn't entirely lost in this vast, uncaring universe. Max, she said, her tone walking the line between sarcasm and genuine concern, I think we're about to see if the Concordium's idea of a final ultimatum comes with a complimentary fireworks display. Here's hoping it's not the kind that involves Earth being turned into a glowing crater, Thrum replied, his dry humor doing little to mask the growing dread pooling in his stomach. The Council, in all its cosmic wisdom, was leaning heavily towards banning Earth technology. Apparently, more empires had reported disturbances tied to Earth tech, which they conveniently blamed on human incompetence. Thrum suspected the real culprit was a galaxy-wide epidemic of aliens attempting to install Earth software without reading the instructions. But try explaining that to a room full of aliens whose heads resembled various baked goods. Zingakara, with his soufflé-shaped head and demeanor of someone who ate nails for breakfast, was leading the charge against Earth. He was convinced that Earth tech was a cosmic Pandora's box, just waiting to unleash untold horrors on the galaxy. Of course, Thrum thought, if you poked anything with a stick long enough, it was likely to bite back. More empires reporting disturbances, Leora mused, scrolling through her comm device. Can you believe this? They're blaming us for a crop failure on Cathrock 12. I'm pretty sure the only Earth tech those farmers have seen is a 10-year-old YouTube video on how to milk goats. Ah, yes, Thrum said, barely suppressing a grin, because clearly, our influence is so pervasive that it even affects alien livestock schedules. We're the universal scapegoat, Leora. It's an honor. The door hissed open, and Zingakara entered, his expression the usual mix of disdain and barely suppressed loathing. Behind him slithered the gelatinous entity, whose presence was as uncomfortable as a wet sock. Ambassador Thrum, Zingakara began, cutting straight to the chase like a man who didn't believe in foreplay. The Council is close to a decision. Your technology's destabilizing effect has reached critical levels according to the latest reports. Thrum leaned back, risking a dramatic move that could end with him flat on the floor. Critical levels, you say? Next thing you know, we'll be accused of causing your soufflé to deflate. Zingakara's eyes narrowed, which, given his anatomy, was quite a feat. This is no laughing matter. The Council is preparing to vote on banning all Earth technology. Let me guess, Leora interjected with a smirk, this decision is based on evidence as solid as a politician's promise. The gelatinous entity gurgled, its voice as harmonious as a rock slide. Zingakara translated, though it wasn't really necessary. The universal language for, you're screwed, was pretty clear. The evidence shows repeated failures, Zingakara said, his voice as cold as a diplomat's handshake. And the Council is losing patience. Thrum sighed, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. Look, Zingakara, if you ban our tech, you might as well ban innovation. Sure, we've had hiccups, who hasn't? But we've learned. We adapt. It's what makes us human. Adaptation or improvisation? Zingakara challenged, folding his arms. There's a fine line between resilience and recklessness. True, Thrum conceded, but if you kick us out, you lose a partner who can think outside the box. Sometimes way outside. Like, where the hell did that box go? Outside. The Council chamber buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with the scent of impending doom. Thrum and Leora joined the throng, feeling the stares of hundreds of eyes, some of which were on stalks, judging them with every step. Thrum took the floor, his voice steady, if not entirely confident. Esteemed Council members, he began, I know you've all heard the reports. Our technology has its challenges, who hasn't had software updates from hell? But Earth isn't here to cause chaos. We're here to collaborate. A murmur swept through the room, punctuated by a few disbelieving snorts. Clearly, Thrum thought, the universe hadn't lost its sense of skepticism. We've faced our own share of disasters, Leora added, stepping up beside him, her voice a beacon of reason in a sea of doubt. Trust me, no one can screw things up quite like we can. But that's how we've learned. We're not reckless, we're relentless. Zingakara stood, his expression unreadable. Relentless is admirable, but the Council needs assurance. Not just words, but proof. And you'll get it, Thrum promised, his resolve hardening. We'll show you what Earth tech can truly do when managed properly. Give us that chance. The debate raged on, a cacophony of voices rising and falling like a particularly argumentative symphony. Every word felt like an uphill battle, every sentence a desperate attempt to sway an audience that was determined to see Earth as the galaxy's unruly child. Thrum glanced at Leora, who gave him a small, reassuring nod. They were in this together, come hell or high water, or, given their current situation, both. As the session ended, the council adjourned, leaving the fate of Earth Tech hanging in the balance like an unbalanced seesaw. Thrum and Leora retreated to their quarters, the weight of their task pressing down on them like a cosmic anvil. Think we made any difference? Leora asked, her voice a mix of hope and exhaustion. Hard to say, Thrum replied, rubbing the back of his neck. But we'll keep fighting. That's what we do. We're stubborn that way. Good, Leora said, a ghost of a smile on her lips. Because stubborn might be all we've got left. As they prepared for another day of interstellar diplomacy, the future loomed uncertain. But with determination and a touch of gallows humor, they were ready to face whatever the cosmos had in store. Because in the end, it wasn't just about saving Earth. It was about proving that humanity, with all its flaws and foibles, was worth the gamble. And that was a challenge Thrum was more than willing to take on. The next morning, Thrum and Leora found themselves back in the diplomatic lounge, waiting for the council's decision. The room was as welcoming as a dentist's office, complete with the same underlying thread of pain. Leora paced, her nerves barely concealed. We need a miracle, Max. A miracle or a really good bribe, Thrum replied, leaning back in his chair. The damn thing still creaked ominously, as if reminding him of its disdain for his existence. Any chance we can convince them with a song and dance number? If only, Leora said, glancing at the door as if willing it to open. But I don't think the Concordium's idea of entertainment includes show tunes. Zingakara entered, his demeanor grim, the gelatinous entity trailing behind like a particularly persistent shadow. Ambassador Thrum, he began, the council has deliberated. The decision is imminent. Imminent, you say? Thrum echoed with practiced calm. Is that diplomatic speak for, brace yourselves? Zingakara didn't smile. Thrum wasn't sure he could, even if he wanted to. The council is divided. Many are inclined to ban Earth technology outright due to the risks. But, Leora prodded, sensing there was more to come. But, Zingakara continued, there are those who see potential in your persistence. They are willing to give you a chance to prove the value of your technology. Thrum's heart lifted slightly, a small victory amidst the rising tide of doom. And how exactly do we do that? A demonstration, Zingakara replied, his voice like gravel sliding down a hill. Show the council what your technology can achieve under careful management. Careful? That's a word we like to throw around just to sound responsible, Thrum said, nudging Leora. And when do they want this demonstration? Immediately, Zingakara replied, no hint of humor in his reply. Of course, Leora muttered, her sarcasm cut short by the gravity of the situation. No pressure then. They hurried back to their quarters to prepare, the weight of the universe resting on their shoulders. As they gathered their technology, Thrum couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. So, he said, packing up Pixis, the little drone that could, we're down to this. One shot to save our tech and keep Earth from being the galaxy's favorite scapegoat. And if we fail? Leora asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. Then we go out with a bang, Thrum replied, forcing a grin. Because if we're going down, we're taking their expectations with us. The council chamber was a spectacle of anticipation, every delegate leaning forward like spectators at a gladiatorial match. Thrum and Leora stood at the center, feeling the weight of 1,000 judgmental gazes. Thrum took a deep breath, centering himself in the chaos. Esteemed council, we present to you Pixis, a testament to Earth's ingenuity and adaptability. The drone hovered into view, its sensors scanning the crowd with an intelligence that belied its small size. Thrum manually activated its projection capabilities, displaying data on various applications Earth Tech had successfully implemented across the galaxy: agriculture, medicine, logistics. Pixis has been instrumental in improving crop yields on barren worlds, Leora explained, stepping forward. It's our ambassador of technology, a symbol of what we stand for. A murmur rippled through the chamber, skepticism fighting curiosity for dominance. Thrum didn't let up. We know our record isn't spotless. But with collaboration, we can turn our innovations into shared successes, not threats. Zingakara watched, his expression unreadable as ever. It's a start, Ambassador. But remember, this is just the beginning. Prove to us that Earth tech can be a force for good. Thrum nodded, the weight of the galaxy pressing down once more. But this time, it felt different. Hopeful, even. As the council deliberated, Thrum and Leora waited, hearts pounding in tandem with the rhythmic hum of Pixis. The little drone hovered patiently, a testament to Earth's potential, and their own relentless determination. "We've done all we can," Leora said, her voice a soothing balm in the storm. "Now we wait." "Yeah," Thrum replied, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "And hope that the universe isn't in the mood for an eviction notice." As the council reconvened, the gravity of their task settled over them anew. But for now, they had a chance. A slim, precarious chance. But in the cosmic game of survival, sometimes all you needed was a crack to squeeze through. And if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was finding a way through the cracks. Even when the universe seemed determined to laugh in their faces. Maximus J. Thrum lounge, or rather, was awkwardly draped, across one of the diplomatic lounge's torture devices masquerading as furniture. The chair was a testament to everything wrong with intergalactic design, equal parts cruel and unforgiving. If comfort were a planet, this chair would be a black hole. Leora Keswick, his assistant and the singular thread keeping his sanity tethered, sat nearby, legs crossed and an expression that suggested she had long since accepted the absurdity of their situation. "Ever feel like we're in a cosmic stand-up routine, and the punchline is always us?" Thrum asked, tapping a rhythm on his comm device. It was either a signal for help or a plea for someone to invent time travel and whisk him away to a universe where couches had cushions. Leora chuckled, a sound that was both comforting and slightly ominous given their location. "Every day, Max. Every single day." Zingakara, the souffle-headed alien with all the warmth of a tax audit, had left them dangling on the precipice of hope. The council's decision was imminent, which in bureaucratic terms translated to prepare for a drawn-out wait that could last until the heat death of the universe. "So, what's our next move, fearless leader?" Leora asked, her voice a mix of cheer and challenge. Thrum pondered, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "We need to play to our strengths. Show them something that screams humanity, not literally, unless things get really desperate." "You're thinking cultural exchange?" Leora prodded, raising an eyebrow in that way she did when she was half impressed, half ready to call him an idiot. "Exactly. If they think Earth tech is a Pandora's box, let's show them the box was only mislabeled. We could start with something harmless, like music. Everyone loves music, right?" "Define everyone," Leora replied dryly, because the gelatinous entity seems more like a noise complaint waiting to happen kind of guy. Thrum chuckled, a sound like gravel in a garbage disposal. "True, but it's worth a shot. Besides, I'd rather risk their eardrums than try another PowerPoint presentation." They set to work, gathering what they had. A ragtag collection of gadgets and gizmos that, when combined, might just pass as a primitive sound system. Pixis hovered between them, its sensors blinking as if questioning the sanity of its creators. "Think this'll work, Pixis?" Thrum asked the drone, who responded with a series of unimpressed beeps. "Don't listen to him," Leora said, patting Pixis like a grumpy pet. "He's just jealous he's not the brightest lightbulb in the galaxy." With their makeshift stereo cobbled together, Thrum and Leora headed back to the council chamber. The room was as inviting as a snake pit with a welcome mat, but they strode in with the determination of martyrs marching to the gallows. Or, more accurately, comedians to an unwelcome open mic night. The delegates watched with expressions ranging from skeptical to downright appalled. Zingakara sat at the head of the table, his souffle head tilted at an angle suggesting he was mentally constructing a list of ways to torture humans with subpar seating arrangements. "Ambassador Thrum," Zingakara began, his voice a blend of disdain and mild curiosity. "What new form of chaos do you present us with today?" Thrum flashed a smile that was more teeth than cheer. "Esteemed council members, allow me to introduce you to Earth's finest ambassador, music. We've cobbled together a cultural exchange, something to showcase our creativity and adaptability." A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber, punctuated by eye rolls and a few resigned sighs. The gelatinous entity slouched, if gelatinous blobs could slouch, seemingly bracing for an auditory assault. Thrum nodded at Leora, who hit play. The sounds of Earth filled the room, melodies and rhythms, a cacophony of styles from every corner of their little blue planet. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and utterly human. Leora leaned closer to Thrum, whispering, "You sure we shouldn't have gone with interpretive dance? In this crowd? Never," Thrum replied. "We'd be carved into performance art ourselves." The music played on, and slowly, ever so slowly, something shifted in the room. Delegates leaned in, one or two even tapping appendages in time with the beat. The gelatinous entity quivered, possibly to the rhythm or possibly in existential dread, hard to say. Zingakara raised a hand, silencing the music. "An interesting display, Ambassador. But how does this translate to technological assurance?" Thrum took a deep breath, the kind you take before stepping off a cliff. "It's about demonstrating our ethos, Zingakara. Tech isn't just wires and code, it's an extension of who we are. Chaotic, yes. Unpredictable, undeniably. But it's designed for connection, for sharing. That's what we offer, solutions that adapt and grow with us." A silence fell over the chamber, the kind that usually precedes either enlightenment or disaster. Thrum could only hope for the former, but was grimly prepared for the latter. Leora stepped in, her voice cutting through the tension. "We realize Earth tech seems like a wild card. But it's a card worth playing. With the right partnership, who knows what we could achieve together." The council members exchanged glances, a silent debate playing out in a language older than words. Hope flickered in Thrum's chest, a fragile flame in a galactic storm. Finally, Zingakara spoke, his tone measured. "Your argument is compelling, Ambassador. Perhaps not entirely sane, but compelling nonetheless. The council will deliberate further." With nothing left to say, Thrum and Leora bowed and exited the chamber. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud, leaving the weight of uncertainty behind. "Well," Leora said, letting out a breath she hadn't known she was holding, "that went better than expected?" Thrum shrugged, already feeling the exhaustion creeping in. "It's something. A start. And in this line of work, that's as good as a miracle." As they made their way back to the diplomatic lounge, Thrum couldn't help but chuckle. "If we pull this off, the history books better have a chapter on the power of a good mixtape." Leora grinned, shaking her head. "I wouldn't count on it. But hey, at least we'll have a killer story for the bar back home." The wait dragged on, the kind of interminable stretch that makes you question your place in the universe and the efficacy of time itself. Thrum tried to get comfortable, a futile endeavor given the chair's persistent vendetta against human spines. Leora kept herself busy, tinkering with Pixis, who was behaving like an overenthusiastic puppy, seemingly pleased with its role in the day's events. "At least one of us is having a good time," she remarked, watching the drone zip around the room. "To be fair, it doesn't have a nervous system to worry about," Thrum replied, feeling the edges of a headache brewing. "Though if this goes south, I might consider getting mine removed." "Think they'll bite?" Leora asked, her voice softening to a serious note. It was the question hanging over both their heads, the one neither dared to voice aloud. "Hard to say," Thrum admitted. "We gave them something to think about, a reason to pause. In this game, sometimes a pause is all you need." The door opened, snapping them both to attention. Zingakara entered, his demeanor inscrutable as ever. "Ambassador Thrum, the council has reached a decision." Thrum rose from his chair, feeling every ache and groan of his body. "And that decision is..." Zingakara paused, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "The council is intrigued by your approach. There is potential, as you say. You will be afforded a trial period, an opportunity to demonstrate the safety and utility of your technology in a controlled environment." Leora exhaled, relief and tension mingling in her expression. "Thank you, Zingakara. We won't let you down." Zingakara nodded, a gesture that might have been respect or simply acknowledgement. "See that you don't, Ambassador. The galaxy has little patience left, but for now, Earth remains an option." Thrum allowed himself a brief, triumphant smile. It wasn't a victory, not yet. But it was a foothold, a chance to prove that humanity, for all its chaos and unpredictability, was worth the gamble. As Zingakara left, Thrum turned to Leora, feeling a cautious optimism settle over his weary bones. "Well, that's one small step for a diplomat, one giant leap for optimism." "Don't get too comfortable," Leora teased, though her eyes shone with hope. "We've only just begun to fight." Thrum nodded, feeling the weight of their task lighten ever so slightly. Then let's show them what we're made of. Because if we're going down, we'll do it with style, and maybe a killer soundtrack. With renewed determination, they prepared to face whatever the cosmos threw their way. Because in this universe, as unpredictable and unforgiving as it was, there was one thing they knew for certain. Humanity had a knack for finding a way through the cracks. Maximus J. Thrum stared at the chair in front of him, a modern masterpiece of intergalactic sadism, with more angles than a geometry textbook and less comfort than a bed of space nails. His back had already declared war, but for now, it was a skirmish he had to tolerate. They were on the cusp of something great, or potentially catastrophic, depending on which side of the human optimism spectrum you stood. Leora Keswick, his ever-supportive assistant, was busy fidgeting with Pixis, their overly enthusiastic yet surprisingly dense drone. If only they could harness its eagerness and convert it into actual brainpower, they'd have a galactic genius on their hands. Alas, even the most advanced Earth tech had its limitations. Think the Council's decided to launch us into a black hole yet? Leora asked, her tone as dry as a Martian dune. If only we were that lucky, Thrum replied, rubbing his temples. But no, they're more likely to smother us with indecision. Death by bureaucracy, the slowest torture in the galaxy. The door to the diplomatic lounge hissed open, revealing Zingakara, who carried himself with the grace of a man who just walked barefoot through a field of broken glass. His souffle head bobbed slightly as he approached, a sign he was either deep in thought or considering where to bury the bodies. Ambassador Thrum, Zingakara intoned, his voice as chilly as the void between stars. The Council has deliberated. Thrum straightened in his chair, or as straight as one could get on a device seemingly designed by a committee of sadists. And, Zingakara's eyes lingered on Thrum, clearly relishing the moment of suspense. A professional torturer would be proud. We've decided to proceed with your unique proposal. Leora's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and delight. You mean we've got the green light? Zingakara inclined his head, a gesture that might have been a nod or a warning. Yes, but with conditions. The Council requires a demonstration that your technology is not just a cacophony of noise and chaos. Thrum allowed himself a small smile, the kind you make when your execution is postponed for a later date. Conditions are something we can work with. What's the plan? Zingakara gestured to a holographic display that materialized with the ease of a bad habit. We've arranged for a joint exercise with other empires. Your technology will be tested for its ability to adapt and provide solutions to a series of simulated crises. So, basically, save the galaxy. The game show. Leora quipped, leaning back, arms crossed. In essence, Zingakara replied, without a hint of humor. Seemed souffle head wasn't one for irony. Thrum nodded thoughtfully. This was it. Their chance to prove that Earth technology wasn't just a Pandora's box of chaos, but a toolbox of potential. And what's the prize if we win? Zingakara's lips twisted into what might have been a smile, or maybe he just had gas. The continued survival of your species as a credible galactic member. Well, put that way, how can we refuse? Thrum said, standing up and grimacing as his spine popped louder than a bag of popcorn. The room they entered was larger than the diplomatic lounge but just as uninviting. It had the charm of an interrogation room crossed with a morgue. In the center stood an elaborate console surrounded by representatives from various alien cultures, each more bizarre than the last. A 10-eyed creature from the Ethereal Consortium, a being resembling a pile of sentient moss from Wildthor, and a mechanized alien who looked like they'd escaped from a scrapyard. Ah, the humans, sneered the scrap heap alien, their voice like nails on a chalkboard. Here to introduce chaos into the cosmos. That's the idea, Thrum replied, stepping forward with his best attempt at diplomatic charm. Think of us as a spice in the bland soup of galactic monotony. You mean poison, quipped the moss creature, its voice a rustling whisper of leaf on leaf. Leora leaned over to Thrum, whispering, who knew we'd be doing stand-up for aliens? Stick around, Thrum whispered back, the comedy's just getting started. Zingakara took the floor, gesturing for silence. The Council has devised several scenarios that will test the adaptability and resilience of your technology. Success will demonstrate its value to the intergalactic concordium. Are these scenarios randomized? Thrum asked, glancing at the stunning array of alien skeptics. No, Zingakara replied. We've specifically tailored them to test humanity's greatest weakness, improvisation. Thrum chuckled darkly. Joke's on you. Improvisation is the one thing we're good at. Our entire political system is based on it. With a flick of his wrist, Zingakara activated the console, projecting a series of holographic icons representing different crises. They ranged from asteroid deflections to viral outbreaks, each requiring a different aspect of Earth technology. Leora quickly scanned the options. We can handle these, right? I mean, we've got tech for days. Sure. Thrum replied, assuming Pixis doesn't decide to reenact 2001, A Space Odyssey. But hey, let's give it a shot. The first crisis was a simple one, asteroid deflection. Thrum stepped forward, activating their makeshift sound system. Music blared, the rhythm calibrating a series of sonic pulses designed to alter the asteroid's trajectory. The alien observers watched with a mix of astonishment and trepidation as the asteroid veered off course, narrowly avoiding a collision with the digital representation of a moon. That was effective, the scrap heap alien admitted grudgingly. Thank you, Thrum said, tipping an imaginary hat. We call it Moonlight Sonata in Deflection Minor. Next was a simulated viral outbreak. Leora tapped into Earth's biomedical databases, unleashing a swarm of nanobots that eradicated the digital pathogen in record time. Impressive, murmured the moss creature. Your technology is adaptable. Leora grinned. We're good at adapting. Humanity's been doing it for thousands of years. Some of our ancestors even survived disco. The simulation continued, each crisis a test of Earth's ability to innovate under pressure. Thrum and Leora worked seamlessly, like two halves of a machine, orchestrating solutions with the finesse of conductors leading an orchestra of chaos. Finally, as the last scenario concluded with resounding success, Zingakara stepped forward, his expression unreadable. It appears your technology is capable of more than we anticipated. So, does this mean we've won the intergalactic lottery? Thrum asked, his voice tinged with hope and sarcasm. Not quite, Zingakara replied. But you have proven that Earth technology possesses the potential for greatness. The Council will consider your proposal for integration. Thrum exhaled, relief washing over him like a cold shower. They'd done it. They'd shown the galaxy that humanity wasn't just a collection of unpredictable lunatics but a resourceful species capable of greatness. As the alien delegates dispersed, Leora turned to Thrum, her eyes sparkling with triumph. So, what's next? Thrum shrugged, a satisfied grin playing at the corners of his mouth. Guess we keep doing what we do best, surviving, thriving, and maybe throwing in a little bit of chaos for good measure. Leora laughed. I'll drink to that. And as they left the room, leaving behind the echoes of their success, Thrum couldn't help but think that they'd just laid the foundation for a future where Earth, with all its quirks and flaws, might just have a place among the stars. The universe, with its vast expanse and countless mysteries, was still as unpredictable and unforgiving as ever. But for now, at least, humanity had carved out a foothold. It was a small victory, but in a galaxy teetering on the brink of chaos, it was priceless. As they walked back to their quarters, Thrum realized that for all their faults and failures, humans had one thing going for them: an unyielding, relentless drive to find light in the darkest corners of the universe. And if that wasn't worth celebrating, he didn't know what was. Here's to the future, he said, raising an imaginary glass to the stars. Leora clinked her imaginary glass against his. And to all the trouble we'll cause along the way. They both laughed, the sound echoing through the corridors of the intergalactic concordium and into the vastness of space, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. Maximus J. Thrum sat at an overcrowded bar in the intergalactic concordium's diplomatic lounge, nursing what the bartender assured him was a local specialty, but tasted like fermented despair. The place had all the warmth of a frozen asteroid, but right now, it was the closest they had to home. Leora Keswick joined him, juggling two oversized glasses of the same dubious beverage. To our marginal victory, she announced, managing not to spill a drop. Marginal, the sweetest word in the diplomatic dictionary, Thrum replied, clinking his glass against hers. Here's to not getting vaporized today. Leora chuckled, a sound as reassuring as the hum of Earth tech. I'll take that over another council meeting any day. Do you think they actually liked us or just found us too amusing to toss out? Could be either, Thrum mused. Or maybe they just love a good underdog story. Everyone's a sucker for those, even if the underdog's a scrappy planet with barely functioning tech and a penchant for irony. They sat in silence for a moment, the reality of their situation sinking in like quicksand. Earth had clawed its way to recognition in the galaxy, not through sheer technological prowess, but with a combination of grit, wit, and a somewhat concerning ability to adapt to chaos. So, we're a credible galactic member, now, Leora said, toying with the idea as if it were a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. What do you think that means for us? Thrum shrugged, staring into his glass as if it held the answers to the universe. Possibly more bureaucracy, more meetings, and maybe, just maybe, a bit more respect. Respect, Leora repeated, rolling the word around like a marble. Feels weird, doesn't it? Like wearing someone else's shoes, Thrum agreed. But at least they're better than the ones that pinch. The door creaked open, admitting a blast of sterile air and the imposing figure of Zingakara. His soufflé-headed silhouette was unmistakable, even in the dim, moody lighting. He approached their table with the air of a man who had come to deliver either a commendation or a subpoena. Ambassador Thrum, Ms. Keswick, Zingakara began, his voice a blend of frost and formality. The council has taken your performance under serious consideration. Thrum resisted the urge to make a quip about them taking anything seriously. And, the council is prepared to extend an invitation to Earth to join the Intergalactic Concordium as a probationary member, Zingakara declared with all the enthusiasm of a tax collector. Leora arched an eyebrow. Probationary? Sounds like we're on galactic parole. Zingakara nodded, unamused. A fitting analogy. But it affords Earth certain privileges, such as trade agreements, technological exchanges, and a voice in council matters. Great, Thrum said dryly. The privilege of having more meetings. Leora elbowed him gently. It's a start, and it means we've got a seat at the table. An uncomfortable, poorly designed seat, Thrum added, unable to resist. A seat nonetheless, Zingakara concluded, with the grace of a man used to winning arguments by sheer persistence. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to be part of this illustrious assembly, Thrum said, trying his best to keep the sarcasm to a minimum. Even if our technology is seen as the galactic equivalent of a feral cat. Zingakara's expression remained impassive. Your technology has shown promise, Ambassador. Do not underestimate its potential or the charm of unpredictability. I'm still undecided if that's a compliment or a death threat, Thrum remarked, watching as Zingakara turned to leave. Perhaps both, Zingakara said over his shoulder, a hint of something that might have been a smile ghosting across his lips. Once he was gone, Leora sipped her drink, contemplating their new status. So, we're in. Sort of is better than not at all, Thrum replied. And likely about as good as it gets for now. They sat quietly, the weight of 1,000 bureaucratic sessions lifting slightly from their shoulders. It was an odd feeling. Victory, and one they weren't entirely sure how to handle. But it was a start, and like all starts, it was a mess of anticipation and dread. What's the first thing you're gonna do with our new status? Leora asked, breaking the silence. Thrum considered, tapping a rhythm on the table that echoed like an offbeat drum. Probably ask for a raise. I mean, we're intergalactic now. That's gotta be worth something, right? Leora laughed. And here I thought you'd go for universal peace or something. Peace is overrated, Thrum said with a smirk. But a little bit of chaos? That's where the fun is. Days turned into weeks, and the bureaucracy of becoming a probationary member of the Concordium proved to be as predictably tedious as expected. Paperwork and meetings, interspersed with moments of existential dread, nothing new in the life of Earth's representatives. But amid the drudgery, there was progress. Earth's technology, once the scrappy underdog of the galaxy, was now being integrated into the broader cosmic community. Human engineers were working alongside alien counterparts, sharing knowledge and learning from one another in ways that would have been inconceivable only months before. Thrum found himself in the middle of this strange new world, navigating the labyrinthine politics of intergalactic relations with the same irreverent charm that had gotten him this far. It wasn't easy, hell, it wasn't even remotely sensible at times, but it was theirs. And that was more than anyone could have asked for. One evening, as he and Leora were wrapping up another exhausting day, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. So, what do you think's next for us? More of the same, probably, Thrum replied, leaning back in his chair. More meetings, more negotiations, more trying to convince everyone we're not total idiots. Think we'll ever win them over completely? Leora asked, half joking. Thrum shrugged. Who knows? But at least we've got a foot in the door. And if there's one thing humanity's good at, it's sticking around until everyone else gives up. They shared a laugh, the kind that comes from knowing you're in over your head but wouldn't have it any other way. For all their faults, humans were nothing if not persistent. With Earth's new status as a probationary member, things began to change, not just for Thrum and Leora, but for the entire planet. There was a new sense of hope, tempered by the usual cynicism that came with anything involving politics and technology. Back home, Earth's leaders were celebrating the unexpected victory, spinning it into headlines that would surely boost their approval ratings for years to come. A galaxy of possibilities stretched before them, and while it was still as daunting and unpredictable as ever, it was theirs to navigate. As for Thrum and Leora, they continued to do what they did best, making the most of the chaos, surviving against the odds, and never letting a good opportunity go unexploited. "We've come a long way," Leora noted one evening as they watched the stars from the observation deck, their drinks reflecting the cosmos in miniature. "Yeah," Thrum agreed, a hint of pride in his voice. "And we've got a long way to go. But that's the fun part, isn't it?" Leora grinned, raising her glass to the infinite night. "To Earth, and all the trouble we'll cause along the way." They clinked glasses, the sound a small, defiant echo in the vastness of space, a reminder that humanity, for all its quirks and flaws, had a place among the stars and every intention of making it count. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities in equal measure. But as Thrum and Leora sat together, the weight of new responsibilities mingled with the thrill of possibility. They couldn't help but feel hopeful. Because for the first time in a long time, the universe seemed just a little bit smaller, and the stars just a little bit closer. And if that wasn't worth celebrating, they didn't know what was.